Hey, Tom Hegna on New Year's Eve 2023, delivering my 2024 economic commentary. Just to level set everybody, markets are near all-time record highs. The S&P was up over 24% last year. The NASDAQ was up over 40%. Bitcoin was up over 150%. The 10-year Treasury is at 3.79, pretty close to where it started the year. So interest rates went up and then they came down. Last year, if you remember, I had charts and graphs, so we talked about a lot of things. The number one thing was debt. The federal debt is out of control. Last year it was 31 trillion. Now it's almost 34 trillion, climbing at $5 billion every single morning. The interest on the debt, I said, would be more than the defense budget. It was. Our defense budget's about $800 billion. We're going to spend about $1 trillion this year on interest on the debt. We get nothing for it, all right? It's unsustainable. And the worst thing is that debt is still climbing at an unbelievable pace. It's unsustainable. And when this thing goes down, I don't know when it's going to happen. It could be years away. I don't know. It's going to be bad. It's going to be worse than the Great Depression, I can see, because we're just spending money that's crazy. And then we have literally an invasion coming through our country through the southern border. We can't even afford what we've got now. How can we afford to do all of that? So it's a big problem. It will continue to be a big problem. But the number one thing for 2024 is going to be the election. And you know how divided our country is right now. It's going to get way worse. It's going to get way worse. This is going to get very nasty. There's probably going to be deep fake videos where they, all of a sudden a video appears of somebody doing something to somebody and it's all done with AI. It's going to be nasty. And everything's going to be politicized, okay? So, like if the Fed does cut interest rates, that'll be political because obviously he's trying to help the other side because he's juicing the economy will be better, and so he's going to help the Democrats. That's going to be the language, okay? Everything that's done is going to be looked at through a political lens. And it's really dangerous when both sides say if the other guy wins, it's the end of the world as we know it, because that then justifies them to do literally anything to take him out. And, there's rumors of anything that's going to happen. And there's a new movie out, Leave the World Behind, where there were cyber attacks and they focused on first you isolate people, you take away their phone, their TV, their internet, and then you do some misinformation and then they get paranoid and then they start killing each other. And that was that whole point of that movie. And they're kind of pretending that that's something that could happen. So it's going to be a very dangerous time. I hope it's not as nasty as what I see, but I see some very nasty stuff coming. As far as the economic overview, markets are doing well. I mean, who would have guessed that Powell could have raised interest rates 550 basis points and the market almost went straight up through all that? I mean, it's really incomprehensible how that happened. And institutions right now are very, very bullish. Individuals are a little more skeptical. But as this market goes up, there's going to be FOMO, some fear of missing out. I think that's going to happen in the crypto markets as well. People ask me, well, Tom, what's going to take over the U.S. dollar? Well, it's not going to be China. It's not going to be Russia. It's not going to be Saudi Arabia. It's not going to be Europe. I think if anything does take over the dollar at some point, it will be some form of cryptocurrency. Years ago, I said I support 1% of a portfolio into crypto, and I got attacked for it because I'm the safe money guy, I'm the guarantee guy. But to me, it makes total sense because if I lose 1% of my money, it won't hurt me. And if Bitcoin goes to $1 billion or $1 million of Bitcoin, it'll certainly help me. And I will tell you, since I put my 1% in there, that has been by far, nothing's even close to performing as well as that. And so I feel very comfortable in a 1% holding in crypto. I do. As far as inflation, now we've seen inflation start to come down. Goods prices, I'm seeing gas prices down. I'm seeing egg prices down, milk prices, bread prices. And even if the actual price hasn't been coming down, you're going to see a lot more specials. Like if you get your grocery store ads, you're going to see a lot more specials on bacon and cereal and eggs and milk and all that kind of stuff. Denny's came back with their original Grand Slam at $5.99. You're going to see more of that. Okay, so goods prices definitely are coming down. Wages, not so much. I don't think wages are going to come down. Housing and rent, they said rents come down a little, but I'm not seeing much that housing prices are dropping very fast. Maybe a little in some areas, but they're not dropping rapidly. Services, they haven't been coming down. And so there's parts of the inflation calculation that it's going to take longer for that thing to get down to 2%. Now, Europe, it's come down a lot quicker, but Europe is pretty much in a recession. Germany's in a recession. Europe is having some big problems, and we'll talk about the world here in a little bit. Last year it was the government debt. Last year it was 31 trillion. Now it's almost 34 trillion. I talked about the interest being $1 trillion. Unsustainable. This is unsustainable, and this is going to be bad at some point. I can't tell you when, but when it's bad, it's going to be really bad. Interest rates. So Powell has said a couple weeks ago that they're ready to pause, and that they expect maybe 3 rate cuts next year. Well, that immediately got walked back 4 days in a row by 4 different Fed governors that basically said, we're not even talking about starting to cut. So I don't think the Fed is going to rush into cutting. I think the only way they're going to cut is if the economy starts hurting. Like if we head towards a recession, if things start going bad in the economy, then they will cut, I think. But if things are going pretty good in the economy, there's really no reason for them to cut a lot, okay? So here's the deal. People think that the Fed sets the interest rate in the country. Well, the Fed sets the overnight bank lending rate, which affects almost 0% of your clients. It's just the other rates typically key off of that. And then, the 2-year would pay a little more, and the 5-year would pay a little more than that, and the 10-year would pay a little more than that, and the 30-year would pay a little more. That's a normal yield curve. Well, as you know, it's been inverted, and right now what's happening is the market is going to pull interest rates down. The market is determining the interest rates, not the Fed. The Fed's still up at 5.5, but now the 10-year's down below 4. And I think the market, which historically has always been the thing that set the rates, it's not been the Fed. It's been the markets. The markets used to, remember when they used to talk about the bond vigilantes? They used to drive Fed activity, okay? It wasn't the other way around. And it's just, we kind of got used to the Fed driving interest rates. No, the market's going to drive interest rates. And I think the market's going to pull rates a little lower, okay? Until, and another thing, the reason that Powell has to be careful is that if you go back to the 1970s and 80s when Paul Volcker had to raise interest rates at 20%, well, what people don't know is he didn't go straight to 20. He paused. I think they even cut when Argentina had a problem, and then inflation came raging back, and he had to raise all the way to 20%. So I think the Fed knows that. They're gonna be a little extra cautious. And they don't want to, if they cut, they don't want to have to start raising again. And so I think they're gonna hang on for a little longer. Plus, every cut that they do will be looked at through a political lens in 2024. It's unfortunate, that's the way it is. Now, in the past, we've had QE, quantitative easing. We are now in QT, quantitative tightening. Well, if QE is like printing money, what's QT? It's like shredding money, okay? And if you think about it, for the past 5 years, who's been the biggest buyer of U.S. government bonds? It hasn't been the Chinese. It hasn't been the Russians. It's been the U.S. Federal Reserve. And they're not buying now, okay? At a time when the government's issuing even more debt, they're not buying. Not only are they not buying, they're basically shredding some debt. They're taking away some liquidity. And so that could be, like Jamie Dimon said, we haven't seen this before. And this could cause some big problems. So we don't know, all right? But here's what I do know, just based on supply and demand. If the supply of something goes up and the demand goes down, what happens to the price of things? The price of things goes down. And if you're talking bonds, if the price of bonds goes down, what happens to the interest rate on bonds? It goes up. So there's going to be some upward pressure on interest rates just from the government needing to sell so many bonds and the Fed's not buying them. Well, who's going to step into that void and do it? And if not, people are going to say, no, I'll buy it, but I need a higher interest rate to buy it. And so that's going to be a dynamic. There's going to be some pressures on market pressure to lower interest rates, but there's going to be some market pressures to raise interest rates. So we'll have to see how that plays out. Housing, if you're a first-time home buyer, is pretty tough, all right? There just isn't a lot of supply out there. The prices have not come down. The mortgage rates were as high as 8%. Now I think they're in the high 6s again. And 40% of the people out there own their homes with cash. So they're probably not gonna sell and try to get an 8% mortgage, okay? And then of the other 60%, 65% of those people have mortgage rates under 4%. So they're probably not gonna sell to go out and get a 6 or 7% mortgage. So it's, Mark Zandi said he doesn't see housing stabilizing until 2027, and he's a pretty smart guy. Now, as I look around the world, there's some things I see. First of all, I'm super concerned about what's happening on our southern border. I mean, we are literally being invaded by people we don't even know. And it's not from Mexico and Guatemala. These people are coming from all over the world. And I'm sure there are terrorist cells that are just coming right into America. It's crazy how we haven't secured the border. We have to have a secure border. I just don't understand what's going on. I mean, that really, really, really concerns me. Ukraine, I wish we would have given them more weapons earlier. Like, we should have given the tanks earlier. We should have given the aircraft earlier. They could have won that thing, I think. If we would have given them the right equipment at the right time, we could have ended that thing. But there's a lot of people in Washington and the military-industrial complex that likes to keep these wars going on and on and on. I don't like that. But hopefully we can get an impasse, or we can do something in Ukraine, because it's crazy how many people are dying on both sides of the equation. It's just terrible. And then we look at Israel. They were brutally attacked, and now, the death toll in Gaza is going high as well. And on both sides, there's so many innocent people being hurt and killed. And I just hope Israel, brings this to a conclusion soon. Gaza is not that big. They just gotta eliminate the rest of those Hamas fighters, and then hopefully they can start rebuilding and giving the Gazans the life that they deserve. I hope that happens. When I look around at China, last year I said, President Xi, every speech says he's going to take Taiwan, and that his leadership will be a failure if he doesn't reunite Taiwan. And so I was very concerned about that. Well, then President Xi came over here. He met with Biden. He said, I'm not going into Taiwan. He met with our business leaders, all the top corporate leaders, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and all the Apple and all Meta and all those guys. And he said, we need your business. China's economy is hurting very badly. Their unemployment rate among the youth is over 30%. And their economy is really stagnated since COVID. They did that mandatory lockdown, and they did it longer than anybody else. So he's asking these businesses to come in and bring their business back. He said he's not taking Taiwan. So that lowered my temperature, at least on the China-Taiwan deal. And then about 2 weeks ago, I'm watching Kyle Bass, who's one of the smartest guys in China, and he said, look, just read every single speech that Xi's ever given. He says he's going to take Taiwan. So if you believe that he's going to do that, he said it right now, we have sent a whole bunch of arms and ammunition to Ukraine and Israel. So our stocks are probably the lowest they've ever been. We're kind of engaged in two different wars, not directly, but indirectly, all right? We may have the weakest leadership team that we've had in 150 years. And he said, if you were China and you said you're going to take Taiwan, you'd find me a better time than 2024, when the country's going through a nasty election. We're involved in two wars. I don't know. So now I'm a little concerned again. But hopefully they won't. If China goes into Taiwan, that would be bad for everybody. That's literally World War III right there. Europe is basically in a recession. So let me try to bring this all in for a landing. There's so much uncertainty in the world right now. And what I would tell you is that in times of uncertainty, people crave certainty, which is what the insurance industry brings. We have guaranteed lifetime income products. We have guaranteed death benefits. We have guaranteed interest rates. We can give people certainty in times of uncertainty. And now you've got the reports from BlackRock. BlackRock doesn't sell annuities, but they say adding an annuity increases portfolio performance. You've got Ernst & Young, an accounting firm. They don't sell annuities. And they said that the optimal portfolio in retirement is 30% whole life insurance, 30% income annuities, and 40% investments. Now, that lines up with the research of the top researchers that I follow as well. But to see Ernst & Young publish that, so you have disinterested third-party references now that can help you bring solutions to your clients. So look, I hope you have a great 2024, and I will see you next year when I give my 2025 economic commentary.